Europe moved from the center to the periphery, and in doing so, it found prosperity and peace, although this did not become apparent and obvious until after 1992. The Cold War reinforced lessons learned by perceptive statesmen from the horrors of 1915 to 45 and fostered, my second observation, European integration. Proposed by Robert Schuman, tirelessly striven for by Jean Monnet, and embraced by Konrad Adenauer. First, the European coal and steel community, then the European economic community, and since 1992, the European Union, embraced neoliberal economic policies in order to so intertwine the economies of former enemies that future war would become unthinkable. Integration provided West Germany, and after 1990, the whole of Germany, a framework in which it could assuage the fears of its neighbors who had suffered from its aggression. And it provided the whole of the Union the chance to build prosperity unimagined between the wars. And the same belief that business partners do not wage war against each other has led the European Union to its great adventure of enlargement from 15 to 27 members since 2005, committing the Union to eliminating the causes of and capacity for military conflict in Eastern and Southern Europe, as well as in the West. The third post-war development sought to remove a domestic impetus to foreign adventure by recasting the social compact of European states to cool class conflict by means of the social welfare state. First in Britain, by the Labour government in 1945-46, but then in Germany, France, and Italy at the hands of center-right Christian democratic governments, networks of social security that guaranteed education, medical care, and security of jobs or unemployment benefits eased social conflict, permitting political competition to occur within the bounds of a democratic-republican consensus. As a very practical consequence, even during the depths of the Cold War, commitment to the social welfare state absorbed state and social resources that in the past had maintained military establishments, that had generated perceptions of mutual insecurity and fueled arms race. You couldn't afford guns and butter, and they voted for butter. If you spend all your money on butter, there are no guns to make you insecure. While this policy remains a frustrating example to the United States of free riding within NATO, it provided space for Europeans to unlearn the arts of war. In 1947, the Allies abolished the state of Prussia because it embodied militarism. I dare say that if you go to Berlin and even see a swearing in of conscripts for the Bundeswehr, you would have to search far to find a less military organized society than that portrayed on the streets of Berlin today. That's a radical change, a radical change. The Cold War, European integration, and social welfare state permitted Europe since 1945 to fundamentally change social, political, and economic structures that had led to instability, insecurity, and aggression during the first half of this century. Jim Sheehan, recently retired at Stanford, pursues this strand of thought in his fine recent book, Where Have All the Soldiers Gone? The Transformation of Modern Europe. I highly recommend this book to you. Sheehan's synthesis covers the same bloody history leading to and through September 1st, 1939, with the same dark vision as Matzover, Weinen, and Wasserstein. But more than they, he stresses the post-war period as what he calls the rise of the civilian state, in which the purposes of the state had shifted from being solely or even primarily limited to military defense, in scare quotes, creating an insecurity that so easily slips into aggression, based on the premise that the best defense is a good offense. Shifting from that to the purposes of the state being primarily the construction of a fair, just, and prosperous society for the citizens and the residents of the state. The ends of the state, he argues, have shifted from the support of the military to support of the citizen. Now, Sheehan is no Pollyanna. He recognizes that in a dangerous world, sometimes more defense is required. This is one reason why he explains in a concluding chapter, its title is, Why Europe Will Not Become a Superpower. The European Union will not perform some of the functions that the United States has and does as a superpower. But it also means that although there can be other September 11ths, or from the European perspective, March 11ths for Madrid and July 7ths for London, although there may be more September 11ths, Europe will not be the site of another September 1st. In German history, the weight of responsibility for the crimes unleashed on September 1st, 1939, and indeed for those that preceded it ever since the rise to power of the National Socialists in January 1933, is called the past that will not pass away. Die Vergangenheit, die nicht vergehen will. Whether the consensus of historians remains with the dark interpreters of the early part of this decade, or follows Sheehan's brighter prospect, will be determined only by the course of future developments. But regardless of which historical account proves most persuasive, September 1st, 1939 will remain, for Germany and for Europe as a whole, a past that will not pass away. So, thank you for your attention. For me to entertain questions as long as you're willing to ask them. Yes.
Were you positive that you feel war was inevitable, that other intervening powers, or even powers within Germany, could have stopped it? Because, for example, General Beck, who's the head of the German army in 1938, was preparing to depose Hitler. Hitler attacked Czechoslovakia, that the army was not ready to go to war, and that they could have had the power to depose it. Or the fact that in 1936, when he had occupied the Rhineland, there was an order to withdraw if there was any opposition to the French. So that, you know, I'm not comfortable with the idea that there was nothing that could have been done to avert the war.
Well, I mean, clearly counterfactuals are not something I'm particularly into, and Beck walked into his presence with a gun in his pocket and didn't pull it out. Georg Elser, the communists, were the most busy trying to kill him, and they didn't get to him either. And of course, by July 1944, it was too late, even if it had worked. Steve Schuker, I think, has shown that in reality, neither Britain or France was in any position to do anything in March of 1936. France was deeply in a political crisis, on the verge of revolution. The French right was protesting the election of the Popular Front government, and they were shooting in Paris at the time. So, in the best of all possible worlds, had the French had their act together, conceivably, yes. But the reality is they didn't. And there's substantial evidence, Schuker is persuaded and persuades me, that there was no way, and the British always have a problem with their army. A, they don't have one, and B, it's not on the continent, ever since they lost Honolulu. Sure, if Hitler